Hi, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. And today I'm very excited to be joined by Eva Jurczyk and William Boyle. We're looking forward to a great conversation. I'm just going to get things introduced and then turn it over to them. In case you don't subscribe to our newsletter or check our updates and you are an in-town, in Texas customer, just a tiny update. We actually closed the store early today for in-person shopping, and we are going to be opening, hopefully, early tomorrow afternoon, which is Friday afternoon, the 4th, because of the winter storm. So if you're a local Texas customer or for anyone out there experiencing bad winter weather, stay safe. We wish you all the best. And our virtual event tonight, as well as our virtual event tomorrow night, is still happening. So, okay. If you want more information about books by either author or you have any questions, don't be shy. You can put the questions in the live chat in YouTube or in the comments here on Facebook. And I'm dropping a link in the comments right now with information on how to order books and information about both authors. So I think that covers my housekeeping for tonight. I'm going to bring on Eva Jurczyk to start this. How are you tonight?
Good. Also cold. It's snowing up here, just like it's raining ice down there. It feels like it's the whole continent that's under it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we're in a unique position, except that the second there's any ice on the road, we shut down. So fingers crossed we can just get past this quickly. You have a short and sweet bio. I'm going to go ahead and read. The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections is Eva Jurczyk's first book. She lives and works in Toronto, Canada. We are also joined by William Boyle. I joke that my favorite person every time we do a virtual event is the guest moderator because they do my job for me. So thank you for being here tonight. It's so nice to meet you in person as well, or virtually. After hearing such great things about you from mutual acquaintances. So I'm looking forward to this chat. I'm going to do your bio as well and then leave you to it. William Boyle is from Brooklyn, New York. His novels include Gravesend, which was nominated for the Grand Prix de Littérature Policière in France, The Lonely Witness, which was nominated for the Hammett Prize and the Grand Prix de Littérature Policière, A Friend is Gift You Give Yourself, an Amazon Best Book of the Year, and most recently, City of Margins, a Washington Post Best Thriller and History Book of 2020. And you are coming from Oxford, Mississippi, correct?
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I love the store. I was only ever there once when I was in Houston, but it's a great store.
Thank you. You're always welcome. Thank you for being here and doing this tonight. I'm going to go away. I'm going to leave you to it and see you in about 35 or 40 minutes. Have fun.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Eva. How are you doing?
Good, William. How are you? I told you this before we started, but I'm intimidated because I'm such a big fan of yours.
Oh, no, thank you so much. And I love your book so much. I'm so excited to be doing this. And I hope with all this weird weather that we don't have any technical hitches or anything. But it's great to see you. And I'm excited to talk about your wonderful book, which just came out. Did it officially come out last week, or when was
last week? Yeah, so it's been out. It came out last Tuesday, so we're 9 days in.
Nice, great. Well, I kind of want to start with just I don't know. I know you've done a couple of other events, and I'm sure you're already going to start to get tired of some questions. I know how this stuff goes, but I'm probably going to hit a couple of those kind of classic, already classic questions. So I mean, one of the places I wanted to start was just to have you talk a little bit about the origins of the book and your process, your path to publication. And I know this is one of those things that probably everybody is going to ask you, but I know you're a librarian, and your book is about a librarian and is set in that world, and it's a great, rich world for the story. So I wanted to see if you would talk a little bit just about your experience and how your history as a librarian informed the book.
Yeah, sure. A lot of questions in there. I'll try to hit them all.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. So I'm a librarian. The book is set in the world of a rare books library, and I didn't grow up wanting to be a librarian. I wanted to be, I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know how to do that, and that just didn't seem like a really feasible career path. I joke that I'm an immigrant. We have to be practical. So I had to be an accountant or something. And so I went to library school. And on the day that I finished, on the day that I graduated, I walked across the street from my house to a tattoo parlor, and I got them to give me a gigantic tattoo of a pen, because I figured it was my insurance policy. Because I'm like, I'm going to like being a librarian, but I'm supposed to be a writer. So I'm going to get this tattoo. And if I never sell a book, if I never pursue writing, then it'll be stupid that I have this, and I'll be embarrassed about it my whole life. But as long as I pursue writing and I can call myself a writer, it'll make sense. So when I was in grad school, I got the opportunity to work at the university's rare books library, and I didn't really fit in there. Like, everyone who works there is kind of PhDs, and they know everything about everything. Most of them had been there for a really long time. Sort of a fish out of water. And I think because of that, I was just so in awe of the place and of the stuff. I mean, it's just as mysterious a place as it reads in the book. It's a really special spot in the city. It's, most of Toronto's favorite building. Sort of ugly on the outside. It's a brutalist structure, but on the inside, It's a cathedral. But my favorite part of it was actually the basement. So there are these 2 layers of basements underneath where a lot of the collection's kept. And they're sort of like ugly and huge and sprawling. And there's these locked cages and rolling stacks that you have to kind of turn with a hand crank that were installed sort of at different times. So it's super haphazard, and you could really get lost down there. Like, you'd have to know where you were going to navigate it. And you could be down there and no one would really be able to find you, or you might hear footsteps but never encounter another person. And it was just this spooky spot, but also magical. You turn the corner and you might see Frederick Banting's Nobel Prize, or you might see, something that Charles Darwin himself touched. All kind of, you never knew what to expect. And the people who worked there were really sort of strange too. A lot of them had been there for decades. They had these really complicated relationships with each other, the way that you would have complicated relationships with people that you've worked with for that long. And I just sort of sat back and watched it all and was really fascinated by it. So Rare Books wasn't my first novel. I have a desk drawer novel, as lots of us do, one that never found its way anywhere. But after I'd been out of that Rare Books library for a couple of years, it stuck in my mind as just this crazy space that I wanted to spend a little bit more time in. And when I sat down to write this book, it came pretty quickly, because like the setting and the people and getting to spend time there, like, that was so much fun to write about. And the idea of making it about theft, about missing books and missing people, that seemed to make sense to me too, because, you read all these stories like every couple of years. Vanity Fair, the New Yorker or something will publish an article about one of these real thefts. And it's always like, nobody's doing it for money. It's always someone who's so deeply passionate about the thing that they want to own it. And the people that I worked with were like that too. Not that they were, walking out the door with $500,000 Bibles, but they were so crazy about this stuff and so deeply in awe of it that, you could almost see it if they were like 15% less responsible or less moral, that they might do a thing like that. So thinking about those characters and about that type of crime, it really came together like that. And it was, fun to write.
And what was the process of writing it like, in terms of kind of from the idea to the finished product?
Like I said, it came pretty quickly in terms of process. I'm an outliner. I like having, I like knowing where the story's going. From day one, when I first started thinking about it, I knew who did it right away. Like, that was never a question in my mind, because I thought if any one of these characters was going to do it, it would definitely be the one who did. So I knew that, and I sat down to write an outline. But it's a mystery, right? So that's a whole different thing. And while I read a lot of crime fiction, like I really love crime fiction, I don't always read a ton of mysteries. So I actually had to go back to, I picked up a bunch of Agatha Christie's, because I'm like, okay, I need to understand how these like structures are supposed to work. So all right, I have like my first book missing. That's my first body. When like at some point I'm going to need to put a second body in there. And that was really fun sitting there and laying that out. And then, you know, once I had that loose structure and I got to writing, then I got to do the parts that were really fun. Like I said, I read a lot of crime fiction, but the stuff that I love, and I'm not just saying this, but this is one of the reasons that I love your books. I love it when it seems like a writer is almost like incidentally writing a crime book, but what they're actually writing about is like they deeply want to tell you about like a place and some people. You know, I feel this way about like Richard Price novels, for example, where at the end of those books, I sometimes don't like thinking back about Clockers. Not that I don't remember the crime. I remember the crime, but I remember like the details of the convenience stores and more.
Yeah.
Like all those, and I love that like specificity of detail that I think gets like crime fiction does that so well.
Yeah.
And so it was so much fun to sort of fill the like take this outline and turn it into something like that, where I got to be really specific with the details. And because the nature of this book, there was a lot of research too into the manuscripts and the stuff that's in the library. And that was really fun because I'm not a rare book librarian. Like I said, those are very smart people with way more education than I have. So when I'm looking at, you know, when I'm reading about this stuff, it's almost like I'm looking for the gossip about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where a real rare book librarian might tell you, I mean, amazing stuff about something like the Plantin Polyglot Bible, which is like one of the manuscripts that gets stolen in my book. And they might be able to give you like a richness of detail about like how it was printed and how it was pressed. But I'm like, you know, a bunch of them were lost in a shipwreck. That's cool. That's cool. That's the detail that I was looking for. So getting to like research that stuff and thinking about, well, what goes in and what's too much detail. And then what I found so much fun about a mystery novel is like once you do that first draft and once you get that first pass, then you kind of get to go back and think about where there should be, you know, where there should be clues or where maybe you've given too much and you need to take some back. And that was really cool. It's like putting together a puzzle. When I do read a mystery or I, you know, watch a movie that has like a twist ending, one of my favorite things to do is to go back and read it again or watch it again. Like almost more like I'm a person who like, I don't care about spoilers. You can spoil anything for me. I want to go back. Yeah. I want to go back and see how it was put together. So getting to write a mystery and getting to do that, putting together yourself was really cool.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you said a lot there that is the stuff that kind of drew me into your book most of all is, you know, the fact that it is kind of, you know, a place novel and it is about these characters, so, these rich characters, and that's why I fell so fully into the world, because I'm the same way. I read a lot of crime fiction, but I don't read a ton of mysteries, you know. I mean, I have never, you know, I've always been drawn to kind of the darker crime stuff, I guess, and the more character driven stuff. But I mean, your book manages to do both things, I think, in a wonderful way. I mean, there is this driving plot, this driving mystery, but it's really, you know, it's a Toronto novel. It's got this rich cast of characters, and you know, and this hook of the setting, which is so incredible. So yeah, and thank you for the nice words about my book, and I agree about Richard Price, of course. I love. So speaking of that, you mentioned Agatha Christie, and maybe it's a good springboard into talking about other influences. I think when I'm starting work on a book, I don't have a fancy name for it. I just kind of put at the beginning of a document like a list, to start listing works that I want to have some impact on the story, films and books and albums that I will, you know, in my mind at least echo in some way, or I'm feeling inspired by for this particular book. My friend, the writer Jordan Harper, calls it his spirit board, I think. But I don't, you know, I just kind of list stuff. And I was wondering if you had a list of other stuff that, or you know, other, you know, direct influences on structure like Agatha Christie, or just works that you wanted to echo, or, you know, wanted to, you know, their influence to seep into the world of the story in some way.
A couple of books that I was thinking about a lot was so Emily St. John Mandel, who's sort of most famous for Station 11, I guess, and The Glass Hotel after that. But she started her career writing crime novels. I mean, I don't know that she would necessarily call them crime novels. I would. So there's a couple. There's Last Night in Montreal, Singer's Gun, and I think there's one more that's maybe about like a musical quartet. And they have all the stuff, like if you're familiar with her sort of more famous books, they have all the same stuff in that, you know, the time kind of moves all over the place, that you spend time with a lot of different characters. Like all the stuff that I love about her books is there from the beginning, really early on, but they're crime fiction. And it's surprising when you read her later stuff, because it's this is not necessarily in there. And they were a really big influence on me because, again, they are spending time in a really particular world. They're Toronto fiction. You know, she spent a little bit of time here, Toronto and Montreal, and those are both cities that I know really well. And there's just not, I mean, there's not like a ton of Toronto fiction. Oh my God, somebody Canadian is going to be watching this and they're going to be like, what are you talking about? But like from the parts of the city that I know, like Mandel will reference like clubs that I went to in high school. And that's really cool. That's really cool to read about. So those books, in terms of thinking about time, also making something like a mystery novel or a crime novel, but also really rooting it in place and character, those were a really, really big influence on me. And then when I was going back and doing reading, I mean, like stuff like a Patricia Highsmith and getting like the darkness of that stuff, you can't go maybe all the way that dark in rare books, but like at times you do. And then Megan Abbott's a big influence too, because I just find that the people in her books, like there's always like the people are just like weirder than they would be in real life. And that's something that I try to do in my book, like make the characters and their characteristics maybe like 15% stranger than they would be in real life. So you have the character of like, there's a university president who's training for an Ironman. And so in so many of the scenes, he's like wearing his bike helmet and like drinking shake. And obviously in real life, the university president wouldn't come and like have a meeting with you with his bike helmet still on or be stretching his calves. But he might do like a slightly less extreme version of that. And yeah, and the lesson that I took away from the books of someone like Megan Abbott is that you can turn up the volume in that way. And that works really well in that type of fiction. Yeah, so that's kind of like the list of stuff that was in my head.
Yeah, and I mean those are. I have actually not read it. I've only read one. I've only read Station 11 of Emily St. John Mandel, but I need to read more of her. But I love Patricia Highsmith and Megan Abbott are two heroes of mine too, for sure. And I think there was a early on when I first was getting to know Megan a little bit, I heard her give a talk that was about weird choices in fiction. And it's something I think about every time I sit down to write is I just have at the top of my to-do list, make weird choices, Megan's quote. And I think that, that's another thing that drew me so far into your book was that little bit of, that the details, the richness of place and character, but those little kind of weird touches, which is something that I love. I love any hint of weirdness or strangeness. I think that kind of can set a tone in the world of a story that's more memorable. And I felt that in your book. And I think, I don't know that when I started reading it, I was expecting it. And I was just so drawn into it for that reason. So, yeah.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. For my desk drawer novel that was like rejected a bunch of times, I actually got one really useful piece of feedback in those rejections. And it's something super similar to what Megan Abbott said. And I can never remember the exact wording. And it was a really elegant sentence that she wrote, but something about that there just wasn't like the art just needs to have like it just needs to be more interesting than life in a way. Like you can't just represent life on the page. Like there has to be something that sets it apart. And that's what I think about that extra 15% or 15 degrees of just like that extra bit of weirdness. And I think that I hope that readers respond to that.
Yeah, I think they will. Yeah, I always think of, there's this Italian director I love, Raffaello Matarazzo. He made these melodramas, these really, really heavy-duty melodramas. And I was listening to some extra about one of his films, and the critic or the professor who was talking said he defined melodrama as taking the drama beyond reality, which is a term I think melodrama gets a bad rap as in terms of just using it as a way of kind of talking down about a work. But I'm not calling your book a melodrama at all. I just like melodrama, and it made me think of that. It made me think of that similarity between what you were saying and that idea of taking drama just a little bit beyond reality, or making that weird choice. But yeah, it's a great book, and a surprising book, I think, in a number of ways. It took me just to places I wasn't really expecting to go. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about too, and this might connect to Megan a little bit too, because I thought of Queen Pin, and I read, I think in the back of the book, there's a little brief interview with you where you talk about wanting to write an older protagonist, an older woman protagonist, which is something you don't see a ton of. And I think that's something that we're both, I mean, I've always been drawn, ever since I was a kid, I think I've been drawn to stories about older people. When I remember seeing the Louis Malle movie Atlantic City when I was really young, and just loving the idea that the protagonist could be an old man or an old person, which I don't think I'd seen that much as a kid. And you realize, I mean, the more stuff you see and the more stuff you read, that it's not tremendously common. Or so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and if there were influences there in terms of books you loved or films you loved that do something similar, and just kind of talk about I realize it's one of those things, I never say that name out loud.
It's a Liesel. Yeah.
Liesel, okay. And where she came from, and how she wound up as the protagonist of the story.
Yeah, I just connected that you have a really great book with a couple of older women. Is it
Friend is a gift to give yourself. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, that was great. And also, so I think that you can probably, exactly what I'm going to say. That, I mean, they're just interesting because they have so much experience. They're carrying so much with them, and these are, when you're thinking about an older character, an older woman. This is a woman who has, she's been in love, she's made mistakes, she's made decisions, she's, maybe been mentored and has mentored others. Like there's just such a richness there that isn't necessarily explored. There's some assumption that past a certain age you're not, they're not going to be like a sexual person, they're not going to be a person who wants to go out and do things, and I think that's just wrong. I don't know, I was a kid in the Golden Girls generation, so I don't necessarily believe that. But I think, trying to think of really good examples in fiction, and nothing's coming immediately to mind, which is dumb because I've just always been really, I've always been really drawn to this stuff. I'm Canadian. I've read Alice Munro stories my entire life. So there's always, so it's like, so it's been a really big part of my thinking. And, as a woman or as a girl, you grow up with these older women in your life. Sometimes people sometimes people you've never met, and they always make these jokes that past a certain age you become invisible. Like, you'll be in a changing room, and an older woman will be in the stall next to you, and she'll come out and she'll be like, well, it doesn't matter what this looks like anyway. No one looks at me. And you hear it forever. And that's an idea that I've always found really interesting, that I think that an older woman is so fascinating because they've lived so much, and they've done so much, and they know so much, but so often they're wallpaper. And whether that's because their sort of intellect isn't appreciated, or whether because like as a woman they have now lost their value to the world, they're just not looked at. And that's so strange as a woman, because from the time you're a girl, like from the time you're really young, 12, 13, you're looked at in this way, like your community property. You're catcalled when you walk down the street. It's like a big part of your life, and it's awful. But you sort of build up your self-presentation, and you put up these shields to deal with it. And then it declines as you get older, until one day it just sort of turns off. And that's really how disconcerting would that be, to always have to sort of shield and present yourself as a certain way in the world, and then one day like you just no longer matter in that world. And I wanted to explore that too, because from the point of view of somebody who has to solve a crime, and maybe that invisibility can be useful, because if you're being underestimated or you're not being seen, then maybe you can listen to conversations or understand people's motivations, or do things like that in a way that's useful. But I don't know, more older women in fiction, like older people generally, because like I've said, there's just so much. Even writing relationships, when you think about writing a relationship, there's a marriage. Like my main character is being married to her partner for, I don't know, I should know, 30 years, let's say. Maybe more, let's do some math, 30, 35 years. And like to think about that, to not write about a marriage at its beginning, but to write about a marriage, like if they've been together for that long, and there's still people who have to be out in the world, and maybe there's love, but there's resentment for wrongs that they've done each other. There's secrets they're keeping from each other. There's a partnership there that you just can't. Like the beginning of stuff is cool too. Like I love a coming of age novel. You feel feelings really deeply. That's really great. But coming to something when it's that far into it, and then having to unpack all the things that came before, or guess at the things that came before, I think is really exciting to explore.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things that surprised me about her as a character, not surprised me in some sense, but once I got into the book and realized how up my alley it was, I just think at the beginning, maybe I thought I didn't know who this character was going to be. And then she kind of revealed herself as this kind of hard-boiled, she has a kind of hard-boiled attitude about things, because she's been through stuff and she knows the way things work, and she's existing in this kind of the culture of this place, which she's been inserted into the role as a replacement for the guy Christopher, who's been hospitalized at the beginning of the book. And she is getting attitude from people, and having to navigate all of the kind of the tensions and stuff, and the way she dealt with it, and the kind of the interiority on her part, it really, I just loved it so much. I loved getting to know this character, and that she was the vehicle for this story. Really was the thing that kind of just totally brought it all together, I think.
Thanks. I think it's nice to get to spend time with a character who's not naive. She's not always strong, but at least she's not naive. Like she knows what's up. She understands why she's being talked to the way that she's being talked to. She understands the motivations of everyone around her, and maybe she doesn't deal with it correctly or as she should from go, but at least she's not naive. And I think that can be refreshing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm realizing maybe I should have done this at the beginning, but do you want to talk a little bit about just we've been kind of talking about these characters and talking about the book overall, but do you want to talk about the plot a little bit, or just kind of how the book progresses, or do you want to read a little? I don't know. People typically, I guess, haven't been reading during these virtual events too much, but I just want to give people a little bit more an impression of the book.
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about what it's all about. So it follows the character Lisa Weiss. She's been sort of second in command at this prestigious rare books library for her entire career. The place was founded and is run by this really sort of important man of letters in the community. And he pretty suddenly takes ill. So she has to sort of step into the position of leader under these kind of not great circumstances. And she shows up on day one. And on day one, she's meant to present something, a $500,000 acquisition of this rare set of Bibles to the donors who funded that acquisition. And she goes to open the safe and it's not there. So first this book has gone missing, and then one of the librarians does. And, she wants to bring in law enforcement. She wants help with this, but the institution is just focused on its reputation and what it would mean to have to admit that this thing has been stolen. So at every turn, she's just told, don't ruffle feathers, try to figure it out yourself. Just keep the donors happy. And as she begins to explore what could have happened to the book and to the missing person, she unearths some secrets about the people and the place. So I don't want to say too much more than that, but that's about it. It's about, the cast of characters who have worked together sometimes for decades, and their strange relationships, and then the materials in the place. And I sort of feel like I was vindicated because about a year ago, Cambridge University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, certainly one of the most prestigious libraries, announced that they had a couple of Darwin's journals, so his original journals, that had been missing for 20 years, so that they were certain were stolen. And so when they went missing, they sort of said to themselves the same thing that the people in the book do, that, probably not stolen. We probably just misshelved them. We lost them in the stacks. And they did that for about 10 years. And after about 10 years, they came to terms with the fact, like, nope, definitely stolen. Somebody walked out with these. But then they kept it a secret for 10 more years. For the same reason the people in the book do, because of reputation. You're entrusted with both money, a lot of money, but also, people gift these things. And it's not just the reputation of the library. The institution also gets donations for telescopes and MRI machines and things like that. And these donor relationships are really important. But yeah, they kept it a secret for 20 years. And it was only, I think they had a change of leadership that they came out. And there was a big press campaign where they said, please help us find this stuff. It's been stolen for 20 years. We're sorry that we didn't tell you.
Oh, wow.
So it really bears out that this is exactly how an institution like that would handle a thing like that. You just kind of keep it quiet for as long as you can.
Yeah, and there's so much of the tension early on in the book comes from just this kind of this insular world, and these weird rules of this world, and the ways that people exist within this system that's been set up. It's such there's so much more in the book, as we've talked about, such rich characters, a great place novel, and a plot that really moves. But it is just the place itself is such an incredible hook for the story, such a fascinating way in, because you get tired, I think, of kind of more typical mystery and detective kind of setups, and this is a world of research and obsession and secrets, and it's one that I haven't seen explored in this way, and didn't really know much about going into the book, and was such a vivid, built so vividly, and such a wonderful experience to kind of fall into it this way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I personally need a little break from the mystery novels that are like big, huge, fancy house where a bunch of fancy people have gathered for I think I need like 5 minutes off from those.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, and that's that is another thing I think I was drawn to, because it's kind of it doesn't really, maybe going into it you wouldn't think about it, but it's kind of a novel about class too, because there you have these are not those people that work in the library. Maybe some of the administrative people are, but that's another interesting angle, I think, into thinking about these characters and their existences in this world where there is so much money being donated and thrown around, and you have these wealthy donors coming in that you have to kind of perform for or whatever.
Yeah. I think anytime that you have sort of that volume of money and the sort of power that's associated with having that money, that's always just going to be a recipe for nothing great, I think.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's a great dynamic there that you really do a wonderful job with. So I think we're about a 35-minute mark, I guess. Do we not see any questions yet? No, maybe not. Should we check in? McKenna, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. We
Okay.
can check in. It's fine. We actually had a great question pop up that I was going to ask. So,
Okay.
But before we get to that, I always like to give our guest moderators a chance to talk about what they're working on or what is their latest book. So why don't you tell us whichever book you'd like to talk about, William, the one that's most recent or the one that's forthcoming?
Oh, yeah. I don't have one forthcoming. I had one that just came out. It's called Shoot the Moonlight Out. Came out in November. And it's kind of similar to my last book, City of Margins. It's a sprawling cast of characters set in the late 90s, early 2000s, just lives in crisis crashing together in southern Brooklyn. I won't rattle on about it. But yeah, that's my most recent book. And I'm working on something new, but I'm just kind of lost in it right now. So we'll see how that goes.
I will also mention, I failed to mention earlier that we have signed book plates for anyone who'd like to order either of the author's books. So that is something pretty cool. So this question had just dawned on me, and here it is. Mandy was wondering, stealing art or rare books is such a funny thing to do. You could never resell a stolen object like that, since you got to be around such amazing written artifacts. And if you were inclined to take something, which rare book would you steal? So that's for Eva, but I'd also like to know, in a perfect world, which rare book William would steal also.
So I have to change up my answer a bit because I've had this question. I had this question really early on in October during our when we started doing this thing, and I have an easy answer. So I've always collected Alice in Wonderlands. I'm not like a serious collector, but I really like them when I travel to buy a foreign language edition because the illustrations are always so kind of weird and kooky. And there's a version that I have that's a reprint that Ralph Steadman did the illustrations for. He's the guy who's most famous for doing a lot of Hunter S. Thompson stuff. So if you think of like the cover of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, like you know the style of illustration. So he did an Alice in Wonderland, and I've had this reprint since I was a teenager, and I've really loved it. But I was like, I would love to get my hands on a first edition, or even or even like the original, the pages like with ink blots and all. I've just been obsessed with these things, but on my publication day, I was gifted a first edition of that Alice in Wonderland. I wish I had it on hand because it's just so weird and good. Like I would tell like everyone after this, go and Google Ralph Steadman Alice in Wonderland because the illustrations are really something else. So
that's so cool.
I need to come up with a new answer because I can't steal it unless I'm stealing it for myself because I own it now.
But it's an even better answer because it has that story. So it's fantastic. Yeah. Great answer. How about you, William?
Oh, geez. I love books, but I've never really, I have no knowledge of like first editions and valuable books at all. I would probably just steal a first edition of a book I loved, like, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter or Ann Petry's The Street or something. Just a book I love. But there's John O'Brien's Leaving Las Vegas. I've had my eye on a first edition. That's one of the only books I've kind of looked up, and you'll see first editions of that floating around for like $1,000. And I thought, maybe someday I should do that. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be something like that.
The cool thing about the fact that, if you read a lot of noir, some of that stuff, I mean, they're not necessarily expensive, but the original dust jackets on those, or even what I really love is the kind of cheap paperback editions.
Yeah, me too.
The cover art on some of those is just like incredible. So no, they're never that expensive, but it would be worth maybe pocketing a couple of those.
That's definitely the one thing that I'll just I'll find like a $30 or $40 Black Lizard book, a nice edition of one of those, or something like that, and just I love those old paperbacks.
We have a couple more questions also from Mandy. So she was wondering specifically to you, Eva, Percy Pickens, the main donor to the library, seems like a Texan. Is he?
Well, he's an oil man. We could, like, if he were a local, then he would probably be from Alberta, which is kind of like our version of Texas. But given the volume of money that we're talking about, he might have interests all over North America. So if we want Percy T. Pickens III to be a Texan, then we can call him that. In my imagination, he was from Alberta, which, like I said, is like the sort of the Texas of Canada in terms of ranching and that sort of thing.
She's already claimed him because she just commented all caps. So yes. And then she had another question for both of you. If you could pick a director to make a movie of your books, who would it be? How about we start with William?
Oh man, geez.
You can go book by book if you want. If they're different answers.
Yeah, I'll be here all night. Sorry. I do. I think they are different answers for different books. But there are directors who I think especially these last couple of books. Just 90s New York. I think of just directors that I love, like Abel Ferrara and more recently the Safdie brothers. But we were talking a little bit about A Friend is a Gift You Give Yourself before, which is kind of like a screwball noir. And for that book, I've thought of I don't remember how to pronounce her last name, Lorraine Schiaffara, who directed Hustlers.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
And that's kind of that's one of the most concrete examples I have. I think that one thing I've thought that, wow, that would actually work. That's not just me just daydreaming wildly. That would be a really cool fit. So
I don't know. Think about the Safdie brothers adapting one of your books. That fits to me. I can see that.
Oh, that fits. Yeah, that fits too.
Yeah.
How about you, Eva?
Who I think would do a really interesting job, Sarah Polley. So
I thought that today when I was
if you think of something, if you've seen Stories We Tell and how much of that's about like memory and going back in time and what that means. And then she has a film that probably it's a lot less seen. I think it's called Take This Waltz. Yeah. And that is my favorite Toronto movie because of like the color, like the pigmentation on that. She does something with it where it actually just like looks like the swampy heat of that feels. So in terms of sort of representing that city on film and really getting some of those places and making it look right, I think that would be perfect.
Yeah, she would be perfect. That's a great choice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. We have one person who watches our virtual events all the time and asks a question basically like this, and I think it's fun. So if you had to put together a dinner party with 3 other authors, living or dead, what would your dinner party list be? And you guys can alternate, or if someone already has an idea, jump in, because no one wants to draw the short straw on going first on this one ever.
Jeez, living or dead?
Living or dead. 3 people, you and 3 more people.
So I'm gonna go Ephron, who I know everyone thinks of her as a filmmaker, but you know what? Heartburn is one of my favorite books, so Ephron has to be at my dinner party because she would have all the good gossip.
Yeah.
Geez, this is tough. I'm gonna stick with dead people so I don't upset any of my living friends. I'll say Carson McCullers. I like Carson McCullers a lot. Who else? Back to you, Eva. Sorry.
Oh, I know. Hold on, I'm thinking.
I'm looking around at my bookshelves. I'm cheating.
Yeah, I can't. I'm living in an Airbnb right now, and all my books are in storage. What do I have? Oh, you know what? I have one in front of me in my reading pile. Zadie Smith. She seems like she'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Yeah. What do I have here? Let's see. Oh, geez. Well, I'll name one living writer, but he's very, very old, so I won't alienate any of my other. William Kennedy is one of my favorite writers. I think he's somebody I've never met, and really just totally switched my brain as a young reader and young writer, and I always wish I'd had the opportunity to just meet him briefly. So, William Kennedy.
All right, back to you, Eva. Rounding off your third guest.
Who do I say? Okay. This is another dead person. There is a New Zealand mystery writer. I can't pronounce her first name. Nio Marsh.
Yeah.
Who seemed like she's like, I don't know. There's a
So
weird
witty.
sense of humor in her book. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So she would keep the party going, and like cranky old broad. My favorite type of person. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Nio Marsh.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. You're up to me.
All right, one more. Okay, I'll say I mentioned her before, and Anne Petrie, just because The Street is my favorite novel. So Anne Petrie.
Okay. On that note, I'm going to call it. We can all get a warm beverage and curl up in front of a fire or something during this icy storm sweeping the continent. So thank you both so much for being here. For those of you watching, thanks for watching. If you're so inclined, we have book plates available and a link in the comments to order books. Exactly. And thanks as always for watching. Thanks to both of you for being here. Eva, congrats on the new book. We'd love to see you sometime. William, as always, you're welcome in store. Maybe for the next one. All right, everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, McKenna. Thank you, Eva. Nice meeting you both.
Nice to meet you both. Have a great night and stay safe in that storm.
Oh, thanks. Take care.
Bye.